Now, when it comes to scientific advancement, space is probably the area that most grabs the public's attention. Previously, the domain of countries like America, Russia and China, new developments in space are now being made in many smaller countries, including our own. Here in Dublin, one such company, Cortona 3D, has seen its software put to good use by astronauts on board the International Space Station. Now, to tell us more about this are Sean Duke from Science Spin magazine and Connell Gallagher of Cortona 3D. You're very welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sean, no stranger to our audiences, yes. Our science editor almost at this point. If I could start with Connell, if you don't mind, this is fantastic. I mean, it is good. Every little boy and a lot of little girls have a huge interest in all things space. So to see that we're finally putting some sort of stamp on the old space programme, and in this case the International Space Station, how did it come about and what does it do?
So, yeah, I was one of those little boys about 40 years ago watching the, well, not quite watching, but almost watching the men land on the moon. And so what we do is, when astronauts go into space, they follow a very serious routine in terms of different experiments they need to do. Obviously, they're building the International Space Station today, so there's a lot of procedures they need to follow within that, okay? And so if you think today in terms of your traditional manual, so you get a manual with your television, with your car, etc., and that's a paper-based text you have to read, and you have to follow the instructions, usually with a drawing, okay? Yeah. And so what our software does is it helps you visualize in 3D what you need to do, okay? So everyone builds things today using some 3D software, and so what our software does is it allows the people who are training the astronauts to communicate to them with a 3D video, almost, of what it is they need to do. So it's quite a step change in the way people are trained.
Is it like you have somebody beside you doing the same thing, so you're easier to follow the steps of making something or assembling something?
Yes, indeed. And so, for example, if you're an astronaut, you go to the Astronaut Training Centre in Europe, which is in Cologne, and there they have a big facility with a full mock-up of the International Space Station. And in that mock-up, the astronauts are trained in what they should do from a physical perspective, okay? But that can happen perhaps up to 2 years before they actually go on orbit. Yeah. And of course, they've got so much they need to learn during that period. And so with our software, they can take that on their own laptop, and it's also on the laptop in the space station. So the ATV, which is the European Space Agency's module, when it docked last February, for example, with the space station, they were able to see on the laptop in the space station what they needed to do as a kind of a refresher course before they actually went and did the procedures.
Using Cortona 3D software?
Using our software, yes.
That's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing how much is happening here in Ireland. You would think, of course, that it's all US, Russia, etc., but there's a lot more like Connell as well that are operating at the highest level, and it's great to see Ireland flying the flag in space.
Well, considering, like we're hearing day after day, the message out of government is we want a knowledge-based, technology-based country. That's the future. That's what we want our students coming out and learning. Astrophysics, applied maths, all the necessary science disciplines that will help us develop this knowledge-based economy. Just to get back to Cortona 3D, tell us a little bit about the company, founding it, and how you decided to go for that niche market, or why.
So I spent some time in Russia, and of course Russia's a member of the International Space Station as well as the Japanese and the Canadians, etc. And so I spent some time in Russia during the 1990s, and during that time I met one of my colleagues, in fact, George Pachkov, and George had some technology to do with this kind of 3D visualization, and it's very akin to PlayStation. So it's like almost a video game that is helping you to learn what you need to do. And so myself and George, we founded the company here in 2000. I moved back, I have a family with 5 kids, and so came back to Ireland at that stage to educate them, bring them up here. And so we started working with Boeing, in fact, initially, and then also with Airbus. And then from that, working with Enterprise Ireland here, they introduced us to the European Space Agency programme. And the way that works is that the Irish government commits certain funding to the European Space Agency, but in return, the European Space Agency has to spend that money with Irish companies. And so that money is used to fund the research and development.
Incredibly good, yeah.
And then from that, it helps us to commercialise the products, really. So it's a very good programme from an Irish software perspective.
And with the European Space Programme, I mean, obviously the big question is, when are we going to see some more Irish astronauts? I think we had one in here, or one who was on his way to do some training there.
Yes, well, to be part of the manned programme is actually very expensive. Yeah. So Ireland really isn't a full member of the manned programme, so that's one issue. But I don't think any of the astronauts made it on to the next stage, so it'll be a while before we see an Irish astronaut. Yeah, but on this particular story, it's important that we mention that there's a ground-based application You know, that this is not just all in space, that there's spin-off things that can happen here on Earth.
On the back of,
this knowledge, yeah.
And what's the plan then for the future for your company to grow it?
What we've done is we've taken that research and development and commercialised it now. And so if you think today, if you get some flat-packed furniture, for example, and you've got to assemble that. Well, you know, it's a very frustrating thing for a lot of people.
There, have the T-shirt, yeah.
Exactly. So you've got this drawing, you've got all these screws, and how are you supposed to put it together? And so what we can do now with our technology, basically, is we can show somebody how to assemble something and deliver it on a device like this. I mean, we're all carrying around mobile phones that have big screens today. And you imagine in the future being able to open that flat-packed piece of furniture with confidence, getting the screwdrivers and then seeing it on your phone exactly how you're supposed to.
We were looking at some stuff there on screen a second ago, and it just gives you that total impression. And obviously, the cost factor. You know, the service provider, you subscribe and you get the information downloaded to your phone. Will that be expensive, or how do you price that for the market?
Really, the idea is that this would be something that the manufacturer would give away free.
Right.
So it would be, you know, you buy their product. It's easy to put together, because you can actually see what it is you need to do. So it's a simple win from the manufacturer's perspective. So there's no reason why you necessarily should have to pay for it.
Win-win is right. On a different note, is it true, I was reading a while back that that governments in Russia, China and the US, they particularly want to keep the space program private, or sorry, non-private. They don't want to let it out into the public domain, into commercial interests, because there's so much knowledge to be gained by space and in space over the coming years, and they just want to be able to keep control, or is that nonsense?
Well, maybe in China, Connell might know a bit better, because you've been dealing with people in China, but I think it might be a little bit more control there. But certainly in Europe and the States, they see the value of getting this knowledge out there.
Bringing partners on board.
Yeah, absolutely, and you know, this is going to help us hopefully drive forward with our knowledge economy in Ireland, and we should be involved in space.
Okay.
But certainly, what did you find in China?
I think in the next 10, 20 years, there will be commercial opportunities. The same way today, 50 years ago, if you were to get an airplane to the US, it wasn't that easy. There's no reason why in 20 years' time there are commercial companies today offering flights, or in the near future, working on launch vehicles that will take people into orbit or near orbit. And, always, governments can do things step by step, and it tends to take time, whereas often once things get going from a commercial perspective, people find those interesting markets that people can take advantage of, and that could be one of them.
Listen, excellent stuff. We're going to leave there. Thank you for joining us this morning. Fascinating. Come back soon, by the way.
Okay.
Thank you indeed.